Hi everyone, Stepan here. Today we are going to go over an anti-Italian setup that almost no one plays. So the idea behind this video is to give you a weapon you can play against the Italian that white will not expect, that you are going to have more experience in. It's going to be offbeat but also sound, and you're not risking much. So when white plays e4, we go e5, knight f3, knight c6, they play the Italian. You know that the two most common moves are bishop c5 and knight f6. And you can also play the Hungarian with bishop e7. There is, d6, which is sort of slow. And all of these moves have their drawbacks. Namely, if you go knight f6, then, white has the option to play knight g5, and then you go into those sharp lines where you are almost forced to give up a pawn for the initiative. Or white can, against knight f6, simply go d3 and then play the gioco pianissimo or the gioco piano. And when you play bishop c5, white is going to go c3 and then d4 and so on and so forth. And basically people who play the Italian are going to know those two moves very well. The move I'm going to show you, g6, no one is going to know. If you would like to practice your anti-Italian setup with g6 that I'm going to show you in the video, visit Noctie by following the link in the description. I have imported the g6 Italian as a short repertoire you can practice. So what you can do with Noctie is you can play out positions you would like to study against a human like AI. So basically pretending that you have a human crazy enough to play anything you want against them and allow you to practice. So what I do is I import my either repertoires or themes on Noctie, so any types of positions, and I play them out against Noctie, because that way I get to practice them without having to study boring theoretical lines. I should say that just watching this video isn't going to be enough for you to be able to play this. Practice is what matters, transferring theoretical knowledge into a skill. So we can play against Noctie. I want to play as black. Okay, in the blitz game, let's play. So when I choose an opening in my repertoire, Noctie is going to play the moves in that opening. Okay, Noctie plays c3. It's going to give me feedback on my moves. It says, okay, queen b3. Interesting. I'm going to go queen e7 because I want to defend my pawn. I don't see what else to do. I could go d5. But after queen e7, I'm threatening knight a5. So if knight g5, knight h6, d4, knight a5 seems good to me. I'm going to snap that bishop off. I don't see why I wouldn't. Huh, okay. I mean, I'm just winning the light squared bishop. This is amazing. Okay, can we get away with knight f6? We can. Yes. Mistake? Are you crazy? Wait, couldn't I just go d6? Why is this a mistake? Or knight e4 even? I'm too scared to play knight e4, but I think d6 could be okay. Okay. I don't know why knight f6 is a mistake. Oh, queen b5 wins the pawn. No, I have knight e7. Okay, I'm not too scared of this. Okay, I think I have a very nice position. I mean, I don't see what the problem is. I want to unpin my queen, but okay, let's just go h6 first. Anyway, I'm not going to play the whole game. This is what I do. I play against Noctie, I get immediate feedback, and I get to practice the setup I've been learning. So check out Noctie. Use the code Hanging Pawns if you decide to go premium, and you will get a massive 64% discount. Now let's study the g6 anti-Italian. So when you turn on the Lichess database, g6 is never, on the list of the most common moves. It has only been played 90,000 times on Lichess. Just to compare, the two most popular moves have been played more than 15 million times. So when you play g6, white is going to be at least confused. Okay, so what's the idea? Well, we have this knight on c6, and this structure e5, e4 resembles the King's Indian a lot. So black's idea is to basically get a King's Indian defense type of structure where you avoid all the preparation you normally go through in the Spanish or Italian structures, where you play your bishop to e7, and then you castle, then you go to e8, then you play g6, then you play bishop f8 and bishop g7 and play for this diagonal. So we are going to avoid all of that and go into the critical middle game position straight out of the opening. One of the ideas behind g6 is to fight for d4 without having any tempo issues with our bishop on c5. So normally when you play bishop c5, you want to fight for d4, you want to put pressure on f2, but after c3, d4, usually in the Italian, black plays a6, has to drop the bishop back. You could also run into trouble with b4, maybe knight a4, and this bishop could be a problem piece, let's put it that way. After g6, this bishop is never a problem piece. So what are white's options? Well, we are going to have a look at 6 different moves for white, and in order of how much the engine likes them. So first, let me say that one huge thing white has to decide is whether to play d4 straight away or prepare it with c3. Both moves are fine. White can also simply castle and ignore what black is doing, and white can play d3, playing a sort of passive setup. And the 2 final moves I would like to show you are h4 and b4, which are the 2 offbeat moves that, you know, aim to fight against our setup, but they really aren't problematic. So let's begin with the most obvious move that I think most people who don't know what g6 is about would play. So they go c3, and their idea is to play d4 and, you know, fight for the center. Well, if you turn on the book in master games here, you will see that most people play bishop to g7 or d6, just a normal King's Indian type of position. On lichess, most people play bishop g7, and in fact bishop g7 is the only move that's played. So now we are going to throw another surprise at white. In the e4 e5 structure, usually f5 and f4 are the main pawn breaks alongside d5 and d4. So what we are going to do is we are going to go f5 straight away. So c3 is the move we can expect, and c3 is the move that's, you know, fairly logical after g6. So when they play c3, we don't waste any time, we strike with f5. Now, when white plays c3, that means that they want to go d4. So technically, I mean, they could go d3, and d3 has been played on a very high level before, but d3 isn't a problematic move, and after d3 we can play fe4, d4, and bishop h6, or queen e7. And after bishop h6, white has the option to take on g8, which is the preferable engine move. I don't really like that, but white can also take on h6, and we basically liquidate everything, and we get the semi-open f-file for black to work with, and we can still then play d6 and, you know, bishop g4 or bishop e6 and continue developing normally. So d3 is not a move I would expect many people to play, although it is playable. So after d3, I would advise you to take on e4 and play bishop h6. Of course, you don't want your bishop stuck behind this pawn on e5. You don't want to get a standard King's Indian position where you have a bishop on g7. So if they play d3, I would advise fe and bishop h6. Now, first let's look at a mistake. So on f5, what if white takes on f5? Well, now black is already better. And this is one of the points behind our setup. We want to tempt white into accepting this sort of King's Gambit move, f5, and we will punish this by playing e4. After e4, the knight goes to d4. There really are no other sensible moves. We exchange that and go d5, and I think you can visualize very easily that black's position is superior here. These 2 pawns are a hindrance, not a strength. Although d3 can be played to undermine the structure, white is still going to be left with an isolated queen's pawn on d4, and black is always better. So after f5, white should not take. As we said, they can take, that's a mistake. they can play d3, but most commonly people are going to go d4. And now you see why we're playing f5 and g6. So when they play d4, which is the best move, we now take on e4. And once again, white has very little choice here. White needs to take on e5. If the knight retreats, we just win the pawn on d4. So knight takes, and now we don't, exchange the knight, we play d5. And after d5, even though the engine slightly prefers white, we have this broad center with the pawn on e4, and all of our pieces are active. So the engine likes bishop b5 here for white as the only move that gives white the advantage. If white exchanges on c6, black is already better. The bishop must drop back somewhere to e2, let's say. And after bishop d6, you can see that this is tremendous for black. So after d5, bishop b5, we now just continue developing. Knight e7. c4 again is the engine move. There are other moves, but let's just play the engine move. a6, bishop takes, knight takes, knight c3, developing, bishop g7. If knight takes on d5, then we simply castle, and we use our lead in development and exchange on e5 later. And if cd5, then we trade with the knight, and once again castle. And this is almost equal according to the engine, but it's very easy for white to go wrong. So what we have here is a position where black has the bishop pair, black has the semi-open f file to work with. There's a weakness on e5, we can recapture almost straight away. And if white is, careless and takes on e4, then we play queen h4. And this is already very, very scary. Something like queen e2, we can go bishop f5, putting more pressure on the knight. The best move now is knight f6. It's probably the only move. You could go knight g3, but then just bishop d7. And I think that this is very, very, very good for black. So after g6, c3 is the most logical continuation. What if white plays d4 straight away? Well, after d4, we obviously don't have the option to take on e4. So it's not the same type of position because e4 isn't under pressure. So against d4, we have to approach this like a scotch. So we exchange on d4. White, of course, takes back, and we play bishop g7. Now, after bishop g7, there are several ways for white to play this position, although only one engine approved. And I think it's at this point where we are going to score most points with this anti-Italian setup, because most Italian players aren't really used to the tension that you normally get from the scotch, and most people are going to avoid taking on c6 because even though that's technically the best move, they're going to try to develop. So I should say that knight takes c6 is the only good move for white. We play b takes c6, the castle, we go d6, and after knight c3 we just continue developing. You get a position like this where it's everything is normal. White should have a slight edge, but black definitely doesn't have any problems to solve. So that's the best line for white, and technically the worst case scenario for black, a position in which white's position is evaluated at plus 0.6. However, after bishop g7, and I tested this with many online games, most people play bishop e3. If you turn on the book on Lichess here, knight c6 12,000 games, bishop e3 8,000 games, but in my experience most people end up playing bishop e3. You can also go c3, but that's not as critical. So against bishop e3, we simply continue knight f6, putting pressure on e4. And now let's look at some options. So this is another point where I think white could lose the game fairly easily on all lower levels. So first of all, if you play e5, I take that pawn, so that simply doesn't work. If you play knight c3 defending the pawn, that's fine. But again, black has no problems to solve. This I mean, put this pawn on e7, and this is really a Sicilian type of position. So the fact that black doesn't have pressure down the c file, but instead has pressure down the e file, I think is favorable compared to a Sicilian. So this is, you know, fine. Knight c3 is fine. It's just an equal position. But the critical mistake is f3. And this is something that many Sicilian players will know how to punish. e4, e5 players may not have encountered this that much, but f3 loses immediately. We just take on e4. And after knight takes e4, f takes e4, queen h4 is a winning move. g3, of course, runs into queen e4. Bishop f2 once again runs into queen e4. And after king d2, even though this knight is hanging, we don't take on d4 because we lose the queen. So watch out for that. We still have to castle. But we chase the king away. Bishop h6, king c3, and now we castle, just avoiding rook d1. And the engine gives this as winning for black. You still have to be precise. Of course, we have sacrificed a piece for 2 pawns, but white has no way out. We just take on g2 here, threatening the bishop. Queen f3, saving the bishop, offering a trade. No. Queen here. And I mean, I was playing this out against Noctie, and Noctie played rook h1. So, you know, winning my bishop, but this just doesn't work because of queen e5. And if rook takes h6, then queen a5 check, and you win the queen after the only, you know, reasonable move on king b3, queen b4 mate, on king d3, knight e5. Winning the queen. So you are going to have to be tactically precise here, but know that if they play f3, black is winning. So if white goes d4 straight away, we exchange, and we go bishop g7, and they should exchange on c6. Okay, they should not play bishop e3 and f3. Now, the other moves we have to look at are castles, and then the 2 weird moves. So after castles, nothing has changed. We go bishop g7, and once again, we wait and see what white's going to do. Of course, if they delay playing d4, then d4 has to be prepared, because now the bishop is on the diagonal, and d4 loses a pawn. So they play c3, okay? We go d6, and now you can see our King's Indian setup. And personally, I found myself playing a King's Indian more often than an e4, e5 opening in the g6 Italian, because very often we get to play bishop g7 and knight f6 and castle without, you know, much going on. So white goes d4. We go knight f6. I know that we are offering a queen trade, but there's really not, nothing better to do. We don't want this knight on e7. There's no reason to play knight e7, so we allow this. de, knight e, de, queen takes, king takes. And after bishop f7, we are fine because we take the pawn on e4. And technically this is equal, and if you're not prepared to play a position like this, then the g6 Italian may not be for you, but this is a very rich position, in which both sides, of course, have chances. Black isn't better, it should be equal, but it's interesting, and you have avoided theory. So if you would like to avoid all this stuff, you can play queen e7, or you can also try knight e7, which I really don't like. So there's a way to avoid all of that, but I would recommend that you go knight f6, the critical move, accept the queen trade the f pawn for the e pawn, and just play on from there. Okay, now let's look at the 2, I don't want to call them suboptimal moves, but tempting human moves. So first of all, h4. If you go g6, then h4 is a move every strong player is going to consider. It's like waving a red flag in front of a bull, playing g6 early on in the opening, especially when it's not that common. So I'm going to put it this way. You don't have to react, but I'm going to recommend that you do. Play the move h6. Why? Because that prevents h5. After h4, h6 makes sure that there is no further expansion on the king side and that, you know, nothing's going on. So now if they go h5, we go g5. That's why we played h6, so that on g5 there is no en passant. And then we get a normal position, d4 takes, knight takes, bishop g7, and so on. The game goes on. It's just that these moves have been inserted. So after h6, most people are not going to waste time playing h5. They're going to go d4. So ed, knight d, bishop g7. Once again, we've seen this position. It's just slightly better for black according to the engine compared to the main line positions, with the moves h4 and h6 being thrown in, because by playing h4, white has compromised their king side more so than black has with h6. It's going to be very hard for white to castle king side here. And then finally, I want to have a look at the move b4. Now, this is a move that has been played. It's tempting but very strange, and I would recommend that you don't take it. First of all, knight takes b4 loses the e-pawn, so that's no good. Bishop takes b4 is fine, but equal. And you can play bishop takes, and after castles, go bishop e7. That's what you can do. I wouldn't recommend it, but if you want to be up a pawn and allow some initiative to white, then you should do that. But what I would recommend is the move knight f6. Just ignoring everything that white's doing, continuing your development. You can also play bishop g7 so that you don't have to think about these tricks with knight e5. But if you do play knight f6, then the point behind b4 should be b5, winning the pawn on e5. That does not work. We go knight a5, they take, we exchange, and go bishop g7. And now look at all this pressure. White really needs to play bishop b2. We castle, they go e5, probably, and then knight d5. And we have a lead in development. These two pawns are weak. The engine prefers black. We're going to go rook e8 and d6 and, you know, liquidate all of this stuff. And of course, the e-pawn cannot easily move because the bishop is on b2. That being said, on b4, you can also just play bishop g7 and avoid all of that. And on b5, still play knight a5. The bishop drops back, and we go on, we go on. So, against g6, these positions are very, very easy to play. And they are uncommon, they're nothing like the Italian, and you should have an advantage if you know the ideas. So let me know what you think. I hope you like my anti-Italian recommendation, and stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye, see you in the next one.